Chris, thank you very much for having me. Work for Universal as regards my regular job. It's a large security contractor. Provides about between 14,000 and 15,000 security personnel throughout various states here within the US.
What states are you strongest in?
Really strong in California, and a large percentage of the market is actually in the high-rise commercial field. But then we're also in Denver, we're in Phoenix, just opened an operation in Dallas, and we've done some acquisitions recently, so we have a southeast coast presence now. So totals about $450 million in annual revenue. So it's a large company, third largest privately owned company, about the sixth largest security contractor here in the United States. Primarily contracting with individual clients, but then you raise an important aspect is obviously the liaison with public law enforcement is absolutely critical, and since you happen to be interviewing me here in Los Angeles, the relationship with Los Angeles Police Department is very good, and there's a sharing of intel, particularly when something's going down in the community. And if I might add, I really think that's improved so much over the years, just that general relationship between private security and public law enforcement. I think there's been a real positive move as regards the perception of the industry, particularly by the private sector. I think it's a combination of things. September the 11th was a watershed event as regards an awareness of security, and obviously it had a great impact on the security measures being taken at a lot of private sector facilities. I think that the realization here within the United States, the formation of the Department of Homeland Security to coordinate government functions, and them coming out with the statement that 85% of the critical infrastructure is either privately owned or operated, they know that this is a very important facet of national security. Hence, I definitely have seen an improvement in the relationship between private and public agencies, public law enforcement. There is a definite increase in the sharing of information with its own limitations, of course, and we understand that as regards to confidentiality, but it is improved. And I think, and I know this seems like an unusual comment, but with the proliferation of media, with films and that, they do come to a greater awareness of what private security is and what the role is that it plays. So much before, it used to be the brick and mortar game. You go into a facility and you look at access control and windows and bars and guards, sort of. But now it's really expanded. The IT world has intruded into that facility. And it's got to be given serious consideration, because you can, as you know, you can control access and virtually have a Fort Knox, or a national, the Australian Mint type atmosphere, but then meanwhile it's being shot out over the internet, or the Fed Express comes in the door and the items are being shipped out without anybody even knowing about it. So that is happening. The other aspect that I clearly see is the convergence with the network connectivity of the security. What used to be standalone video access control, now with that connectivity, it's really increased the capabilities of the user to manage the security program.
Do you think that's placed a greater emphasis on security management because of that convergence, the capability, as you say, the capacity of these systems are almost immeasurable?
Yes, it is. It definitely is. In fact, just reviewing the security literature over the years, as you're aware, I've had the privilege of actually writing a book on high-rise buildings. The thing that I noticed was, in between editions, was I would keep my security magazines and that. I get regular publications. And I wouldn't necessarily go through them all the time, but I'd sit down and for a couple of weeks gradually go through them. And the thing that really impressed me is over the last few years, a lot of the articles are written on video, on CCTV, and even more so than the other technology. And that's the area of video that's changed so rapidly, and the capabilities of the technology. I think video analytics was a little bit oversold, but I think that's coming more into its own sphere of influence as regards to capabilities to deliver on that product. So yes, it's all been very positive. And of course, just the mere ability to be able to pull up a camera that's on site while an incident is happening, while you're either in another country or hundreds of miles away, is just fabulous for a security manager to help he or she, to run and manage their program. Yeah, Chris, great privilege. Particularly being
an Australian.
That's right, exactly. In fact, actually, this year 2012 is a great time because of the president of ASIS is Edward MD out of the Netherlands, and this is the first time they've had a truly international president heading up the organisation, and so now throw into the flavour someone originally from the Asia Pacific area. There has been a great awareness of the globalization of the membership, security membership, and about the role that ASIS can play in that, in supporting the members' needs out in areas like the Asia Pacific, the Middle East, Latin America. And interestingly enough, the growth of members, like the membership is just under 37,000 people, and of those, the growth in membership is higher outside of the United States than it is within the borders. So that's an interesting perspective, and I think that's in line with the expansion that's going on globally. In preparation for today's interview, I was talking with ASIS headquarters. Sue Cariotti heads up the program internally as regards supporting development of standards and guidelines, but primarily the standards. In fact, if I can remember this rightly, there's already 5 published standards. 2 of them are about to be released. There's another 3 that are in the pipeline, they're in committee. Incidentally, in committee will consist of individuals from all over the world. It's not a US-centric product. And then there's another 7 standards that are begging to be placed into the process. And that the really interesting thing about that is that this process only started just before, the year before September the 11th. It wasn't driven by September the 11th, but obviously that catapulted it into the public view. And so these standards are very, very important. And I see this as an important step as regards the professionalization of the industry. In fact, we were talking prior to this interview about the body of knowledge that's out there, books and magazines and that. Since the 70s, there's been a gradual ascendancy of the number of publications that are out there, but also the quality of the publications. Again, it's all part of the professionalization of the industry.
Your take on what you're seeing in the US in terms of ISO 31000, you're saying it's being adopted over here?
Well, it is being adopted, but it's a very expensive process for a corporation to do it. But it obviously is not only the value of it itself, but also the marketing of that value to potential customers is very important. ASIS is deliberately gone the track of, in the production of its standards, it's looking to ISO as the end point, because it cannot be just looking in North America, for instance. In fact, you know, the British have done a very good job. They collaborated on one of the major standards. The Australians have been very, very helpful in the process. In fact, as you know, Jason Brown serves on the ASIS Guidelines and Standards Commission. He's been an important player in the whole process and that. So it's really got an international flavour to it, and rightfully so, you know, because we are connected as regards countries. Therefore, the standards that we're measuring ourselves against should be international in nature.
High-rise security and fire life safety,
right,
now into its 3rd edition.
Yes.
I think that, well, no doubt there'll be viewers interested in the process of writing a book, and now into its 3rd edition. In terms of what you've taken out of writing a book, of this kind, and the reach of this book. From my studies in Perth, we were referring to your work. How have you felt that book's taken through your career?
It started off as an interest in high-rise buildings, the way that they operate, primarily the commercial office buildings, and then it gradually evolved into spend a lot of time on the road travelling on business, walking around the backs of hotels and seeing how they operated that. So it moved into hotels, residential, and then the mixed-use buildings where you've got a combination of those occupancies within one facility and that. It's been a great learning experience for me. It also has driven me into the area of exploring out there what is the body of knowledge in that area that I can bring into a publication such as that. And it has just overall been a very positive thing. You know, the whole process of writing a book is probably not what you anticipate at the start, when you realize that you're responsible for obtaining copyright rights to certain material that you're using, photographs, images, again the same process. So you learn a lot through it. But also you realize there are some tremendous people out there that have written tremendous things, articles in magazines such as your publication, your web efforts. That's so important to our industry as regards feeding us to enable us to stay current. So that's one form of obviously write a book. But it is I would encourage any of the viewers that have an idea of something that needs to be published in the security industry so more people learn about it, I would strongly encourage you to go forward with it, because there definitely is a need out there for more information and more fact-based information rather than anecdotal, as we tended to be a little bit many years ago and that. But I see, again, it's all part of professionalisation of the industry that we've chosen to serve in. There's crime in every major city and that, but there's such an awareness here because there's unfortunately there's been a lot of violent crime, So weapons are a big issue here, more so than, for instance, in Hong Kong. Obviously, Royal Hong Kong Police were armed the time that I lived and worked there, but there just doesn't seem to be the type of serious crime occurring as regards people being the subject to it.
But they have had success. New York, LA have had significant drops in crime.
Yes, they have.
And I mean, as a security professional, were you taking learnings out of that, or do you feel that the industry had input into what community policing and those types of approaches, crime prevention through environmental design, those types of approaches, do you see law enforcement implementing those in the last decade?
Yes, I do. It's interesting you mention about New York and LA as regards contrasts and that. New York obviously has a very high population of sworn police officers that are working in the city and that. And New York used to have the reputation for tourists at least, that it could be a dangerous city and that. They have changed that perception dramatically. As you walk through Midtown New York, Manhattan, there's no concern at all. Very high presence of uniformed police officers. Los Angeles has had its challenges because as a city it's so spread out. A lot of mobile patrols, particularly vehicles, also bikes in the inner city areas. But they've also formed this relationship with private security as regards private security is being funded by the commercial property owners to be out on the street doing patrols too. So that necessitates the need for good communications between law enforcement and private security. So I definitely see those sort of things going on. As regards SEPTED, yes, definitely. That broken windows theory, for instance, as regards, unfortunately I was thinking of a city like Detroit where many areas of the city are in decay and crime has just taken the place over. Whereas obviously if you maintain an area, it's going to set boundaries and hopefully dissuade the influx of crime into it. There's a group called the International Police Chiefs Association, and I went to one of their, actually as an ASIS representative recently, went to their annual convention. attention and had a look at the amount of hardware that's out there supporting police forces and that. It's just incredible. And the thing that really impresses me, having lived here for 30 years in the US, is that a lot of the police departments are very well set up. You know, they are doing a very good job as regards response when an incident does happen. Now, I know there's a concern about the funding because of the economic meltdown that occurred several years ago. The fear that I have in that regard is that we've seen, particularly since September the 11th, this increased cooperation with public law enforcement. What worries me a little bit is that if police departments, because of reduction in headcount, become a little bit understaffed than what they would have, maybe there'll be less dialogue with private security because they're so focused on law enforcement and taking care of those operations that they won't have that luxury. So that's a concern, you know.
Is it that balance will be a constant challenge?
Yes, it will, Chris. Yeah, it definitely will be. And so hopefully that there will, but I also think that the local governments are very much aware of the role that public law enforcement plays in as regards the city.
Do you know if there's been any interest in what's happening in the UK at the moment? There's a real push to privatise a lot of the police functions.
Yeah.
And you know the whole model of law enforcement seems to be changing, or they're certainly playing around with different models over there.
Yeah.
Do you know? Have you heard of any interest on what's happening? I think it's shires of Lincolnshire and the like, where they've almost outsourced, you know, a large percentage of law enforcement duties.
Yeah, well, it really makes sense. If there is a function that can be adequately provided for by a civilian, then you don't have the high overhead costs as regards the city financing a sworn police officer. There's consideration maybe in some of the jails that could occur, ones that are, say, for instance, run by the Sheriff's Department and that. But you know, you just brought up an interesting point, which I just thought about. You know, we talk about cooperation between private security and law enforcement, but also I've noticed that there's been a lot of dialogue going on between London and New York as regards there's a group that operates in London called the Sister Banks, which is the major financial institutions in the London area that really support the police operations there. Is that they, in fact, there's a gentleman by the name of Don Randall who's been instrumental in having dialogue with New York as regards adopting some of the measures that are being used in London itself. You know, we talk about the Ring of Steel. You know, it'll be interesting to see what New York's going to look like in a couple of years as they've been tightening up the city as regards access control and that. The use of video, so prolific within London, increasingly so within New York, and other cities for that matter, of course. But also one of the things they've done very well in London is the cooperation with bringing private security personnel that are working in the facilities in London more into the picture as regards reporting crime or being made aware of crimes that have occurred and that. So, and London, I beg your pardon, New York has already developed a good relationship where they'll hold, I think the name escapes me as regards the group itself, but on a monthly basis they'll have meetings, private security, a lot of the beat officers and that sharing information. So it all works really well together. So you've got that international element there to a degree, but certainly within those cities, you know, a strong cooperation that's going on. It may seem in the interview today that I'm could be overemphasizing the relationship between private security and public law enforcement, but it really makes sense, you know, as regards to securing society in general, that it would occur this way. And I'm very hopeful that there'll be more increased cooperation as the years go on. And hopefully we won't have to address such serious threats as potentially some of these cities are facing. But I think it's a very good thing that is occurring.
Great. Geoff, thank you very much for joining me
today.
Good,
Chris. Okay.
I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thanks again.
Thank you.